Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Belgian Football Podcast. This time it's pre-season preview number 2. We promised you we're going to give you a second-tier preview, and that is exactly what we're going to do this evening. As always, I'm joined by Scott and Joris. Scott and Joris, how are you guys doing this evening?
Hello, everyone. There was one league, and now there's two.
Yes. And I'm so up to this.
Joris is absolutely delighted to be talking second-tier football. Anyway, let's go straight into this then. Obviously, it looks a very different league to how it looked last year in the second tier. We've obviously lost Mouscron completely. They've just disappeared to the lower reaches of Belgian football and been replaced by Denza. We've also got a couple of second team teams, if you can call them that, from the top division that have joined the league as well. We thought, before diving straight into the teams, we'll give you a bit more of an overview of like what this league actually looks like, because it's always been a bit of a mental league in terms of structure, results, and everything around it. But this year, again, it's completely changed in how it operates. So Scott, as our kind of number one fan on the podcast of the second tier, has gone away and had a little look and analysed kind of what it actually looks like this year. So Scott, over to you to give the folks a good lowdown on what actually the second division is going to look like in 2022-2023.
Unless you've been living on the moon, everyone, you probably know by now that the first thing to tell you all about is Division 1B, as it used to be called, has had a bit of a rebrand over the summer and will now officially be known as the Challenger Pro League. We're not going to talk about that because we have our own feelings about that. It is what it is. But yeah, it's now known as the Challenger Pro League. So in terms of its structure, for this coming season, there will be 12 teams who are going to play each other home and away over 32 match weeks over the course of the season. So the regular season with 12 sides will be 22 match weeks. After the 22 match weeks, the playoffs kick in. So there'll be a playoff 1 and a playoff 2. Playoff 1 obviously consists of 6 teams. This is the championship playoff, effectively, where those 6 sides will fight it out for promotion to the Pro League. And playoff 2, which is the sides finishing 7th to 12th, becomes the relegation playoff, and obviously the side that finishes bottom drops out of the Challenger Pro League and into amateur football, the first national division as it's known. So the playoff system here in the Challenger Pro League is something new that's coming in this year. So we don't know how that's going to work yet, but we do know a few other things. We know that there are some rules in place to ensure that the 4 under-23 sides, which we'll talk about in a little while, making up this division. That's obviously Club Next, Club Bruges' young side, Young Genk, Anderlecht Futures, and SL16, which is Standard Liège's under-23 side. There are some new rules everybody's signed up to just to try and abide by fairness, if you like, as far as the squads are concerned. So the key things that you really need to know are that qualification rules for under-23 players mean that there are no age restrictions as long as a player hasn't played for a 1A side this season. So as long as you haven't made an appearance for a 1A side, you can be any age and effectively play for the Challenger Pro League side. A new rule comes in after 6 matches into the season. Any player who has started 2/3 of a season or has played at least 45 minutes cannot play for an under-23 side. So that's another kind of exclusionary rule that kicks in after 6 match days. A couple of other important things as well. Half of all the players must have been educated for a minimum of 3 years inside a Belgian academy, and 2/3 of players on each individual team sheet each week must have been trained by a Belgian club as well. So they're the kind of key takeaways here that you really need to know to kind of get you started. Now, as far as the under-23 sides are concerned, this decision to include those 4 sides has been approved for a period of 2 years. So in March of next year, March 2023, there'll be an integration assessment that takes place where the sides will sit down and have a look at how this has worked. Has it worked? Do they need to make changes again? Are they going to stick with the same format? So this is very much a suck it and see situation. Nobody really knows how this is going to work out, but we're going to find out shortly, aren't we?
Yes, we definitely are. It's going to be an interesting one, I guess, because obviously we've had before with Club Next being in there and kind of seeing the results that led to in terms of kind of them not really doing very well, understandably. Then obviously being replaced by Verton, who put up a fight, albeit with like a very like kind of minimal put together team. So it's going to be interesting to see how they fare. Obviously, the games between them are going to be kind of closer you'd expect than some of the ones against the other teams. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. I'm personally never really been a fan of kind of putting like youth teams or under 21, under 23 teams or second teams as they are in Germany into kind of these more professional structures and allowing them to compete in kind of these higher up leagues. I'm happy for it to happen in kind of like amateur football levels, but maybe not in the top things. So if they do well and it becomes successful, I'm happy to kind of change my opinion on that within the Belgian system, but I'm not too sure how it's really going to work in this instance. But yeah, we shall wait and see. In terms of structure for this episode, we'll start with kind of I don't want to call them professional teams, but kind of the non-academy teams, I guess we could call them. And we'll go through them, have a look at kind of what they're looking like heading into the season, kind of expectations around them and stuff like that. Kind of an arbitrary way we've done this. It's just went on Transfermarkt, typed in Challenger Pro League and kind of took the list from there. So the first team to look at for us will be Lommel. Lommel SK, Lommel, who obviously we did a special episode about. Definitely go and check that one out with Mike Green. There's a really interesting chat. Obviously, Lommel are part of the City group, so that has an impact on kind of the players that they bring in. Obviously, a lot of players from Troyes have come in this season. I think it's 3 at least. I have to say, guys, I think I mentioned this before when we're looking at their badge. It does remind me of Somersby Cider. It's got like a kind of Somersby Cider vibe to the badge, and I can't unsee it now. So, I mean, I'm sure it's nice, but can't quite get away from that. Just looking at kind of the squad, I guess kind of the big kind of one that's a bit of an kind of outlier in terms of departures. Obviously, Vinicius Souza is on the list, but he was never going to play for them this season, didn't play for them last season. But Koki Saito, Scott, I know you're a big fan of Koki Saito. He's going to be a big loss for them going on loan to, I think it's Sparta Rotterdam, isn't it, in the Dutch division. Brian Smeets has left as well. Arta Sales, also gone. They've brought in Nassim Chadli on loan from Troyes. Matinho, I'm interested about him. Congolese, Brazilian. That's a very interesting mix and not a kind of dual nationality I haven't seen many times before. It's interesting to see how he goes. In charge of this team is going to be Steve Bald, former Arsenal assistant manager under Arsene Wenger. Interesting hire to bring in Steve. Not sure what to expect from him. Always kind of given the impression of a bit of a hard man. Defensively, he's always been rated quite highly as a coach. So it'd be interesting to see how it impacts them in that sense. But Scott, I know you watched quite a bit of Lommel last season. What are you expecting from them this season and kind of how the squad is looking at the moment?
I know that their fan base has been a little bit disgruntled for a little while. I think, the tail end of last season was kind of quite, I suppose, disruptive is the word. There was a number of coaching changes, none of which were permanent ones. And I think there was a feeling that the club was drifting a little bit. But behind the scenes, there have been plans laid for, a fresh start this year and more stability around the club. And, over the summer, there's been a lot of infrastructure improvements going on around the training facilities and around the stadium as well, which have been nice to see. As you were saying, Ben, Steve Bald's come in as the new T1, which is a really interesting appointment actually, because of his background at Arsenal. I mean, this is somebody who has real proven experience of working with young players and developing them with the Arsenal under-23 side and the Arsenal 18 side. And obviously he was an assistant for a significant number of years to Arsene Wenger, who needs no introduction, but also Unai Emery as well when he was at Arsenal. So, he has a very interesting profile that I think is probably the right one for Lommel. So I can see why he's attracted to what is effectively going to be his first senior head coaching role, really. Another point on Lommel, which I think is quite important, is they've got a completely new coaching staff this season as well. Not just Steve Bold, but T2 Willem Weiss has come over from Anderlecht, and he has quite a lot of experience. Obviously knows Belgian football very well, so he's going to be very useful to help and bring Steve up to speed on Belgian football culture. and also Bruno Andrade has joined the staff there. So a lot of changes on the coaching side, which I think are important. You know, you referred to them losing Koki Saito there. He's gone out on loan. He's a big loss, and this comes back to what I was saying at the beginning about, you know, I think the fans have been a little bit frustrated that they've lost some of what they would consider, you know, their kind of big hitters, the players they would love to see hang around a little bit longer to try and mount a promotion challenge. And that's always difficult when, you know, your top talent is kind of continually coming in and out with different loans. But, you know, that's just the system they're working with. In terms of really good piece of news for Lommel, I just want to give a shout out to Jalan Vanksa, who's a really talented 17-year-old Hungarian left winger who's extremely highly thought of in Hungarian football circles as the next big thing there. He's come to play at Lommel after being out on loan this season. It's going to be really interesting to see, I think, how he does, because he could become quite big if his development goes the way lots of people would like to see it go. But I think there's a general feeling of optimism around the place. You know, the big changes that needed to happen inside the club, off on the pitch and off it, largely have happened now, and I think everybody there is excited to get going this weekend.
Yeah, they also lost their, for the majority of the season, first choice goalkeeper Pierre Marin as well. Well, he didn't feature in the last few months already as well, so I think he lost his place. But goalkeeper changes can always be tricky, of course. In addition to the names that you guys already have mentioned, well, in Lommel, it's a tricky case as well. In general, I guess they're actually the fifth development squad in the league anyway as well. They have some similar strategy as well as some of the teams we will discuss these development teams that we will discuss later on. It will be interesting to see if this mix actually works as well, similar to these development teams, to continue with that. Like the owners don't really mind that much. The development teams cannot go up, but in Lommel as well, the most important thing is to not go down, and so that they can keep developing players at a decent level. Of course, I think they will still go if they can to go for the top division and for the first spot. But we'll have to see how it turns out. To keep going with this development comparison, losing players every year and bringing new ones in, that's definitely something that is also going to happen a lot with the development squads this season as well. In general, I think they have a good squad. Losing Smeets is also an important one to me, especially since they lose it to a team we will talk about soon enough in this episode, to a competitor. I think they will be happy with a mid-table finish, but since we started with them, they have the biggest market value of all teams at the moment, which is part of that system. And it will be interesting to see if Steve Wold can bring them together quick enough to really mount a title challenge.
Yeah, I guess that is kind of the balancing you actually have to play, is kind of like with the fans, in the sense of, if the fans want them to be pushing for promotion, but they're not too worried about pushing for promotion, like you said, Josh, to be able to stay in the division is kind of the key, and like develop players. Like, yeah, that's you're like, it's kind of, that's where the difference is, isn't it? Between, like, yes, you are technically not a development squad, but you sort of are a development squad. But at the same time, you technically are also your own club. Like, Lommel is a club in its own right. In that sense, it was a club before the City Group bought it. It would hopefully be a club after, if the City Group sold it, sort of thing. So it's kind of balancing those two things. But like, obviously, we've spoken to Mike and kind of like what he sees to do with the club, and kind of like how they're trying to improve the infrastructure and everything like that. So you can see there's like, there is long-term planning there. It's not just, we're taking over this club, we'll just flood some players in, develop them, send them off, develop them, send them off. It's like, no, let's improve the structures around them as well, which can only benefit the club in the long run, you'd assume. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. I'd like to see them push to go up, because I'd be interested to see kind of what would happen if they were in the top tier, kind of like, would the caliber of players they got from the City Group kind of change and improve? Let's say someone like Troyes went down, like, would they then get the players that Troyes would have got in a better sense? So yeah, interesting to see. Speaking of the Pro League, let's talk about the side that got relegated last year from the Pro League, which was Beerschot. Really, really young side they've gone with this year, in terms of kind of the players. They obviously had some young players last year that have stayed around, big absence, obviously, Rafa Holzhauser's left, Lawrence Shankland's gone, Halaima's gone, Issa Sumale, a couple of players they brought in kind of last summer that didn't really work. They brought in Andreas Weiland, the Austrian manager, a 38-year-old comes in. He's got a 2-year contract to try and get them back into the top league. A couple of interesting players that they brought in. Andy Koshy joins from Cercle Bruges, the young Belgian midfielder. Robbie Quirn as well, former Antwerp man, was at Denza, now there as well. But they've still got the likes of Stipe Radic, Jan van den Berg, Ryan Sanusi stayed there, which was an interesting one. Dante Ligo extended his stay. They were impressed with what he did during the kind of short spell he had with them at the back end of last year. Ramiro Vaca also still there, Abraham Okerele. But the big one, I guess, is Ilas Sabawi. Lots of interest in him. He seemed reasonably keen or happy to stay there kind of at the back end of last year. I think, I don't know, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but he kind of saw it as a good chance to kind of keep that football development going and then move on. Maybe he didn't feel like he was completely ready. But I guess, guys, they'll be looking to bounce straight back, and Sabawi's kind of going to be the talismanic player that they're looking at to kind of be the creator, score the goals. And I don't know, I feel like we should be quite excited about what we might be able to see from him this season. Just judging from what we saw last year in the Pro League, in the top division, taking a step down, especially against the development squads. I feel like he could have an absolute field day against some of those teams. But a lot will be riding on him, and a lot of their hopes will kind of go how he goes. But nice to see that they've gone a little bit more youthful in terms of the players they brought in to look to build for the future.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. I mean, it was something I kind of wanted to highlight as well, and that emphasis on youth is perhaps not surprising, and I think is the right thing to do. It's definitely a positive. What they have managed to retain, which I think again is a good sign, certainly before the season starts anyway, or is a decent balance of some experience and a little bit of quality with a lot of youth, because the Challenger Pro League is a very physical league. We know that the Pro League itself is very physical, but I think the Challenger Pro League has a different kind of physicality. And certainly last season, there was quite a big difference in terms of the quality of football between the sides at the top of the division and the sides at the bottom, and it'll be interesting to see how that kind of pans out, whether that's replicated this season as well, with the inclusion of the under-23s as well. We don't really know what we're going to get with Beerschot yet. I suppose that's the exciting unknown. Obviously, Andreas Weiland's come in as the new T1. Worth mentioning again, fact fans, that Andreas is actually a former assistant of a certain Dominic Talhammer, currently at Cercle in the Pro League. So that's an interesting one. I'm sure they may be on the phone to one another to kind of catch up occasionally. But yeah, we don't really know what we're going to get with Beerschot, and in many senses it's a kind of fresh start for them. They've got some infrastructure developments going on of their own. They're about to develop a new academy complex, effectively a new training centre, which is kind of quite exciting. So, you know, I'm sure their target is to kind of bounce back. My own feeling is I'm not sure what sort of a season they're going to have yet. We'll know more about that probably in the first 4 or 5 weeks, because much like in the Pro League, I think at the moment there are a number of Challenger Pro League sides who've been kind of quite honest actually in saying we're not really going to be ready for the start of the season, so the start of the season might not quite go the way that we would like. So it'll be interesting to keep an eye on this one.
Yeah, Beerschot might indeed be one of those teams. They only have one striker at the moment, so that's a bit of a worrying sign. Sevawi will have to do everything, give assist, and also probably score some. He will be needed. Good that they kept a lot of their players for this level. They should be good enough. But yeah, I do see that big lack of more than one striker at the moment, pure out striker. They might experiment with that maybe, or maybe there's some talent that we don't see yet, also coming from the youth, a bit like Sebawi actually. Who knows? But yeah, they only have Thibaut Baten at the moment. Yeah, also 20 years old, still has to prove everything. He played for Club Next at this level before he went to NEC, and now and not really featuring there, and came back to Beerschot now. We'll have to see. Like, they have one striker. It could be that he's a success, but despite half a season at Club Next, he is also not a completely proven striker yet at this level, and it's a big gamble they were taking in the beginning of the season, I think. But I'm sure they will do something about that situation. But we'll have to see if that will be in time. And well, it's difficult to predict something for them without having more competitors for that one spot. Well, I assume one spot at the moment in their system.
Yeah, that's definitely a really, really good point. And obviously, last year the strikers didn't really fire that they had anyway. Probably, if you were them, hope that you'd have kept on to someone, even if, like, I don't know, maybe like a Nabisi would have been nice to have kept on to, or one of the, or Suzuki. Obviously, they had Avenatti and Shankland both gone back and left. I think, yeah, obviously, they kind of were hoping that they'd keep Lawrence Shankland. I think there was kind of like a feeling around the club that, yeah, maybe if we can keep Shankland. He seemed reasonably happy to stay, but he's obviously now gone to Hearts. So perhaps they weren't ready to lose him, and now they've just got to go and kind of go back to the drawing board and see who they can find there. But they should really be kind of pushing for promotion if they can. I know you guys are, like you said, like, all depends on kind of if you're ready or not. One side that's been very busy in the transfer window is SK Beveren. We didn't mispronounce that. This is Varsland Beveren, who had a rebrand alongside the other Beveren side, SK Beveren. They've joined together, which is great news for the city, for the town, sorry, and the clubs to kind of rejoin, I guess, in that sense, and kind of bring more fans together. But yeah, again, disappointed that they didn't get promoted last season. They've now brought in Wim de Dekker. He was at Denza last year. He now comes in as manager here. Lost Nordin Jakkers, obviously, to Leuven in the summer. But outside of that, they brought in some decent players. Alexander Corrin from Cercle Bruges comes in. Still only 28 years old, so still got plenty left in the tank. By no means a bad player. They've brought in a couple of goalkeepers as well. Jorn Brondeel, he comes in from Willem II. Beer Royce also comes in from AZ Alkmaar, so he's kind of competitive spots for Jakkers' replacement. They've also brought in Lucas Ribeiro Costa again. He comes in from Charleroi. Sander Koopman joins from Royal Antwerp as well. Again, we've done a special on Beveren when they were Varsland. It was really interesting to talk about the club then and kind of how they thought that going down wasn't going to be the end of the world for them. They were kind of like saying, actually, we should be fine. I think Antoine was kind of like, we've got financially, we're okay. We'll just have to build up and come back. But I think the kind of hope was that they'd do that straight away. This year looks like they're going to really be trying to go for it again. And guys, I think they look like they're probably one of the best teams to go back up. And if Wim de Dekker can kind of re-find the magic he found when he got Antwerp back up, this should be a decent season for Beveren, and there'll be a lot of expectations on them.
Yeah, I think you're right, Ben. I mean, for me, Beveren are certainly one of the favourites for automatic promotion this year, as they should be. I think the additions that have come in are pretty good. There's a good mix of experience, youth, and physicality in the side now that should, over the course of the season, you know what I mean, have enough depth to sustain a challenge, I think, which is very important. In truth, last season they went too far away, I think, defensively, which is really where they kind of fell down. They conceded too many goals last season, just, you know, at kind of crucial moments in games often as well. I think it's important that, you know, Daniel Moderner stayed. He had a very good season up front for them last year. I think he scored something like 13 goals in 27 games with 4 assists. And at this level, that's a really pretty decent return. And if he can match that or improve on that, then I think they will do very well. Interestingly, today, as of recording, they've brought in a new young Nigerian striker from Lorient on loan, I think, for the season, who looks very good. I haven't seen him play, but I was doing a little bit of research, and, you know, he looks like quite an exciting talent who I think could perform well at this level. And obviously the hope is if he can click with Daniel Moderner, then that could be the partnership that fires enough goals in to achieve automatic promotion again. You mentioned Alexander Korn and Sander Koopman, you know what I mean, really experienced heads at a higher level as well. I think they're great additions, and I think the staff at Beveren are in a very good place. You know, Antoine's done, you know, amazing work there, which I just want to give him a big shout out for again. I think the project of merging Varsland effectively with KSK over a 5-year period, which is the plan at the moment, and using the original matriculation number again, and everyone in the Beveren football community coming together at the Free Teal is a hugely positive thing. And I had my own doubts as to whether this would be possible. So it's a tremendously positive thing, this, and a great achievement. And it can only mean things like more money coming into the club, and more community support. And there was already a lot of really, really good, strong, positive community work going on in the Beveren area, run by the club and Antoine and his team. We know Jordi Condom's gone back to being sporting director, really experienced head there, both at this level and at Pro League level. A fantastic addition to the staff there. And Wim de Decker, of course, is an old Beveren boy himself. So in many ways, he's quite an experienced appointment for them, having won promotion at this level with Antwerp in the past. So, looking at it from the outside at the moment, I think all of the ingredients are there for them to have quite a strong season.
Yeah, the one question mark here is not the striking department for unlike Beerschot, but as Scott mentioned, the defense was maybe an issue last time, and they have lost their first team goalkeeper in Jakkers. Yeah, so they will have to deal with that. They brought in Brondeel. Brondeel, I know a little. I'm not completely convinced by him, but I don't know. I can't judge him on this level. But at Willem II, he had his spells, but he never was a real first choice goalkeeper. But they also brought in other reinforcements from inside the Low Countries with Mulder as a central defender, and Coren, indeed, as you mentioned already, and Ablon. Yeah, another left wing back. So they're definitely stuffed there. With also having Chimanga there. They also have a big squad, so they can actually take a few hits. Hopefully they don't need to, but if something happens, they should be able to replace. Yeah, at the moment everything seems the situation looks quite bright for them. Yes.
It's worth mentioning as well, guys, actually, that Kevin Hogas is still there, player with lots of experience at a higher level than this too. So, that's another plus for them too.
Yeah, he scored a couple of cracking goals for them last season. Yeah, I like what they've done. I think they've not even had to spend that big. They've brought in quite a few free agents. But I think, Joris, you kind of hit the nail on the head there in terms of their squad looks the most complete. And in that sense, that's why I feel like that Scott, you also mentioning about how some teams don't feel like they're ready, but this team looks the most ready to go. Like you said, they got Hogas, they got Vestrata, they've still got some players that they brought in last year, and then they've kind of added around that. It's going to be interesting to see how they get on, but they're kind of the team, I think, alongside this next team, who should be really, really pushing for the title and promotion. The next team obviously is Molenbeek, who got to the kind of playoff last season. Unfortunately for them, they lost to Selang. I mean, if they played the Selang of this year, they might have had an even better chance of getting promoted, considering how bad they've looked. But yeah, you can tell they've kind of looked at some areas and thought, right, this is where we want to improve. Unfortunately, they've lost the likes of Nicholas Romans. He's gone to Zolta Varagem, but instead they've also brought in Brian Smeets, who we mentioned earlier from Lommel on a free transfer. It's a great deal. Kylian Hazard's joined permanently. He was obviously on loan from Cercle, but he's now full-time in Molenbeek. Jonathan Harris joined from Eupen on a permanent deal as well. That was a free transfer, which looks like a good pickup for this level. Jan Vorogovsky also come in, former Pro League player as well. Thomas de Festion comes in from Westerlo, who got promoted. And then I guess one of the more interesting ones is Michael Biron, who comes in from Oostend, which kind of frustrated quite a few Oostend fans, because obviously Oostend signed him, then loaned him out to Nancy, and now he's gone to Molenbeek for a couple of million. I think it was like 2.25 million pounds, so I can't remember, a bit more in euros at the moment. Yeah, so I guess didn't see that much of Molenbeek apart from we saw them in the game against Selang and a couple of other games, and it was kind of, they looked good, but they needed a little bit more creativity and ability to break through, which they didn't really have in that playoff game. Biron obviously is going to be a completely different striker to what they had in Igor Di Camargo. They still got Obi Ulare, who stays from Barnsley, but he's injured to start the season. Guys, are you expecting Molenbeek to be right up there again? And do you think kind of the incomings that they've brought in, a couple of players that we know, obviously from the Pro League, are going to give them enough to kind of get over the hump this time and get into the top division?
I think it really depends on what business they do before the window closes. It was interesting, just a few days ago, Vincent Everard, T1, said very, very openly and publicly that he felt they aren't quite ready for the start of the season, and the first 2 or 3 weeks might be a bit iffy for them, because he feels that they are 4 quality players short of what he would like in terms of squad depth, which was quite interesting. I think in some respects last season they did overachieve. I certainly didn't expect them to do as well as they did last year, and I think the season they're going to have this season is really going to depend on the business they do before this window closes. I think I'm not so sure they'll have as good a year this time, but we'll see. I think one big plus is bringing in Brian Smeets from Lommel. I know, as you were saying earlier, Ben, we alluded to the Lommel fans were a little bit displeased with losing Brian Smeets. He went down very well with the fan base at Lommel, and they were not pleased when he left to go to Molenbeek. He's a player who is very physical and has a lot of experience, certainly at this level, but also at Eredivisie level as well. So he's a real big pickup for Molenbeek and a positive. But I just don't know yet. It really depends on what happens over the next sort of 4 weeks of the window. But my gut tells me that I don't think they'll have quite as good a season this season as they did last season, unless owner John Textor's prepared to splash a bit of cash, because he does have some.
Mikael Varon stays a weird one, of course, indeed. Buying him and then loaning him out and selling him for, well, a fraction of the price that they bought him for. But he will also be the one carrying the attack. He will have to perform because, well, Ulare tore his ACL, and that's only a month ago. So, he will be out for the largest part of the season, if he even comes back to the season, given his injury history as well. They will definitely take their time for that to heal. So that means that Byron is also here's another team that actually effectively only has one striker at the moment. I think Byron, purely based on his stats in the French Ligue 2, he should be okay at this level. He should perform well, so I think he can carry that attack on paper. Losing Ramos is a big one. Replacing him with Smeets, it's not completely the same position, I think, but it's still probably a good trade, or a good replacement. Bringing Hazard in, or bring him back in, is probably also at this level, someone who can make a difference, but not in every game, I guess. So that will be interesting to see. I think they're still a bit light obviously in the striking position, but also potentially at the wings. They have Hazard, but then the other left winger also has Zakaria El Ouadi. He also is out with an injury already. So Hazard is also the only player in that position. They have 2 right wingers, of which one is also only brought in now and is 19 from Charleroi, Fabio Ferraro. It's just difficult to predict how he will, if he already is ready for really making an impact at this level. So their squad is thick in some places, but thin in some others, and I think that could be crucial if they indeed don't splash some extra cash in the rest of the window, which I'm sure they will. But at the state of the club at the moment, I indeed would not predict them to have as good season as last season. But I do think there's a good enough basis to probably qualify for that promotion playoff. But how far off that will be of the actual contenders for promotion, that remains to be seen.
Yeah, it seems like there's a running theme that no one has any strikers, or everyone's relying on one striker. So maybe we'll just even itself out, and there'll be no one playing with any strikers by the end of this. I think you guys are right on that, but I do expect them to do a little bit more as the window remains open. Let's go on to the next team, which is Denza, obviously Wim de Dekker's former club. They've gone in a very interesting direction in this sense. They brought in Takahisa Shirashi, Japanese 46-year-old manager who's only ever managed, I think it was in women's football. He was an assistant manager at Excelsior, became sporting director at Denza this February, I think it was. And then, a couple of months later, he's now the manager. Obviously with Japanese owners as well, that kind of explains a little bit there. They've lost a couple of key players, though, so I think it's going to be quite an interesting season for them. Lennart Mertens has gone to Club Next. Justus Chaluk, we've obviously mentioned him a billion times. He's left. Tom Vandenberg's also gone to the same club in Kortrijk. And then Victor Boon, their imposing centre-back, has gone to Union So a lot to do for them. In place of Mertens, they brought in Mamadou Kone from Erpen. Joaquin Cancela Gonzalez comes in from Mouscron, now defunct Mouscron in central midfield. Defensively interesting, like they've brought in Lucio Deporta, the youngster from Zulte Waregem, Haitian Belgian nationality. It's always interesting to see a Haitian footballer in the league as well. So saw a little bit of Lucio Deporta, but not much. So interesting to see how he gets on there. He's still young and got some time. Scott, start with you again, as always, on this one. How do you see Denza going into this? And are you convinced by the managerial switch that they've done?
Well, that's a really interesting appointment in the sense that nobody saw that coming. When it happened a few months ago, we spoke about it obviously on that particular week's episode of the BAFP. Denza's story at the moment is quite interesting because obviously at the tail end of last season they were purchased by the Singapore-based investment company ACA Partners, who have decided to develop their own football portfolio, and Denza is effectively the first club in that portfolio. They do have plans to acquire other clubs and develop a network, much like the City Group and 777 Partners, and other footballing kind of groups that we know. So they're following that model. So this is effectively going to be the first year of their 5-year plan. The objective being to be a pro league side by the end of that 5-year period. They've also brought in a new sporting director as well, Adrian Esparaga, Spanish, and there's been quite a lot of turnaround over the summer, as you were saying, Ben. I think there are around 10 have come in, and something like 10 have gone out as well. And looking at it, there's a kind of decent mix of experience and quality in there, and I think at the moment, looking at it, they do look slightly stronger to me than they did last year, but that's assuming that, the sum of the parts kind of come together. I think there's quite big expectations on Takahisa Shirashai's shoulders here. Obviously, he has a connection with St Truden as well, having been a coach there. But it's quite a big ask for new owners to come in and to appoint you and to want you to spearhead effectively the resurrection of this club, if you like, on the pitch. The owners have kind of pretty grand plans to develop the stadium as well and the training facilities over the next few years as well as part of that 5-year plan. So big plans initially, and if they come to fruition, which is a big ask, all of that, then it'll certainly be some achievement. But I'm not sure how they will do yet, actually. It's just going to be interesting to see how they start the season, I think. But Denza are a bit of an unknown quantity almost for me.
And what's up with having 6 central defenders, of which 3 of them you just brought in this transfer window? It seems to be very stuffed for 1B. That might be a good sign, of course. But I just was going through their squad and that's like, okay, that's interesting. They have 2 new, well, actually 3, but one is coming from the U teams. New goalkeepers with Dutois, also are already being injured or still being injured. I don't know the status on this one. But he was a foot operation apparently. But so we'll have to see how that clicks. The pressure is going to be really high because of the whole project, and I'm always a bit skeptical about such projects as well. So what they do have is definitely a really good striker for this level in Dylan de Belder. Never really been able to break it in 1A, but yeah, in 1B he has really decent statistics over the course of a few seasons. Already now around 59 goals in 130 games in the Challenger Pro League and in its predecessors. Actually only in its predecessors at the moment. So that's not a bad stat. Will it be enough for them to really fight for promotion? Again, I think they should be a team aiming at I know they're aiming for more than that probably, but definitely landing in that promotion playoff, and then hope that they are close enough to maybe even mount a title challenge, or maybe they even would be the first. It's a shot in the dark. In theory, and it looks on paper, it looks quite a stuffed squad and quite a decent squad as well. Do they have enough flash to make it? That's maybe another question as well.
Yeah, no, all valid points. A couple of other players I like there. I like Jihad Bizimana, and then Kurt Abrahams is one I've always been a little bit of a fan of. He's a very small winger. If you haven't seen him play, he's very, very small. But he's quite an exciting player to watch.
Most experienced squads of all, according to the data on Transfermarkt as well. Anyway, so that could play in their favor, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair as well, isn't it? Yeah, they've got lots of like 1B experience in that team, and just lots of kind of footballing experience, I guess you could say. One side who I guess are probably quite lucky to be here, we could say, Arviton. We spoke about them a little bit last year, but they just kind of chucked together a team, saw what could happen. Obviously, they didn't technically stay up, but it was kind of like never expected that they would, and they gave it a pretty good fight in the time that they did do it. Obviously, with Muscon going, they do now get to kind of have another shot at it, and they've once again had to bring in quite a few players to kind of bulk out the team. But on paper, it doesn't look that bad aside. And just kind of going through the players they lost, it's kind of like lots of who's who, and who, because you don't really know. Valentin Guillaume obviously went to Selang. A couple of others have kind of moved around the lower divisions of Belgian football. But outside of that, some kind of interesting players. Yannick Aguimong obviously got promoted with Leuven. He comes in after not really being able to feature for Leuven for quite a few 2 or 3 seasons now. They've gone to Westerlo and picked up a couple of players from there, and Simon Paule, Matthias Locke, Arnie Kassa comes in on loan from Cercle Bruges. So they've worked kind of the free agent market, the kind of lower league kind of player market as well, like they had to do last season. But I feel like this year, guys, especially with kind of the youth teams in there as well, we're going to expect a little bit more from them in that sense, because they should be able to beat those teams. I guess another one I'm kind of interested in, but only because I managed them for a little bit on Football Manager, is Suleiman An, who was an absolute beast for me on that game. He was absolutely ridiculous. He kept me in the league quite comfortably, and then I made sure he could never leave, much to his displeasure when everyone tried to buy him. So yeah, maybe Suleiman An's going to do the same thing for them this season, but I think we're expecting a little bit more of a sustained kind of, not challenge in sense of title challenge, but in sense of being able to keep up with the other teams in the league that are kind of the professional, like non-youth teams this season, aren't we?
If there's one team that there only gets one team relegated, and if there's one non-youth development squad that I see able to be that team, it is them actually. So I'm not actually seeing that much optimism there, although they have 5 strikers, so they can probably loan. I can probably get some loan some out to some other teams in need. In Cagé, they have a very experienced player, should be too good for this level, but I don't know how his motivation is and how his level at the moment also is. Okay, they have a really, really stacked squad, though, yes, but I'm not sure. Yeah, I can't say much. I'm just also my first statement here, hot take maybe, comes out of last season as well, mostly, but also, yeah, really they also have to pull back. They don't have the advantage of having to build on experience from previous seasons that as much as other teams, because they also have to. They had a lot of changes into. Well, as you mentioned as well, again this season. Yeah, I'm not sure if they really that much more experienced in professional football, of course, yes, but playing in keeping a squad together, we'll have to see. But yeah, so I expect them more in the lower end of the table for sure. Maybe among the development squads. Maybe I'm completely misjudging here. Of course, that's very much possible.
It's a wild league, this one. You know what I mean? As we said quite a few times last year, and I don't think this season's going to be any different. So there's always plenty of room to be surprised. And the thing with Verton is the great survivors. You know, as Ben was saying, you know, only still at this level because of Mouscron's misfortune, given a stay of execution. I agree with Ben. I think on paper, I think the squad is a little bit stronger, but I also agree with Joris in that I kind of see a playoff 2 spot. I think they will be in the bottom half. Where they finish exactly really is what we don't know yet, but I don't think they're strong enough to finish in a playoff 1 spot. They've had a change of coach as well over the summer. They've brought back in Christian Braccone, who is a former Verton manager as well, not too long ago. So he's come back for a second spell. Worth mentioning, actually, that they do have a relatively big hitter in terms of a name in Arnie Kassa at the centre-back, who's on loan from Cercle. That's a really good pickup for them, I think. and not the sort of pickup they would normally be able to achieve. So that's a great addition for them. But yeah, I think a playoff 2 spot is probably the most likely bet for them this season.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I just meant in more the fact that they shouldn't finish rock bottom of the table and be completely useless. They should be a little bit more competitive. Another side from last season we'll quickly look at is Liège. Again, lost a couple of decent players in Stallon and Bombay. Kenneth Shermans went to Denza as well to join the centre-back squad that they're putting together there. Interesting though, they brought in Serge Tabakoy, was pretty decent for Mouscron in the Pro League when they were pretty dreadful, had some decent games, joins obviously from Mouscron. Then they've also brought in Leonardo Rocha from Eupen, never really had enough quality I don't think for the top division, but he did have a bit of time in the second tier as well. Dan Viekmans as well joins from Leuven, so to Joris's delight they've got 3 strikers on the book here, so at least they've got a little bit of striking potency. Maxime De also joins in from KV Mechelen. Yeah, they seem to have almost most kind of places covered. It is just the centre-back position for them that's a little bit of a concern, with only 2 recognised centre-backs in the main squad at the moment. So you're kind of a bit concerned what would happen if one of those goes down. Does De or Carl Seltrunen, the more defensive-minded midfielders, have to slot in at centre-back? But going forward, obviously, yeah, I'm a Serge Tabakoy fan. I liked what I saw from him before. Interested to see if like Rocha and Viekmans can do it, or if they're going to be reliant on Jens Nassens. But again, kind of, I think they're going to be similar in the sense to Virton. I don't see them challenging at the top, but could be wrong. But I feel like they're going to be kind of mid-table, potentially playoff 2 bound.
Do you know, Liège are such an interesting club to me, because last season I felt they overachieved slightly, because the season before that, you know what I mean, they were really pretty poor on the whole, and last year they had quite consistent periods and a few weeks where they weren't quite at it, and I think if they could have ironed those out, then you know what I mean, they really could have pushed hard for an almost top 2 or 3 spot last year. They did look kind of ahead of schedule almost, so it's going to be really interesting to see how their season pans out. Quite telling, I think, in that quite early on this summer they extended the contract of their T1 Tom van Emschoot, who's been there for almost 3 years now. So there's a degree of stability there, which I think has kind of served them kind of quite well. And he's at home there. Obviously, Van Emschoot, fairly experienced in his own right, actually, as well. Another interesting one, fact fans, as well as being a previous Lommel T1, he was also a certain Felix Mazu's assistant when Felice had his short and unfortunate spell at Genk, which is interesting. But yeah, I mean, bringing in Serge Tabiku and Leonardo Roca are both quite decent pickups for them. And I think if they can, you know, if they can go on a run like the one they did last season, then I can see Liège finishing in playoff 1. But it really just depends on whether they can be consistent enough over the course of well, the initial 22 games anyway.
Another team that has been a bit hampered already and a bit unlucky. They brought in Jens Teunkens as goalkeeper on a free, but he also tore his ACL a few weeks in the preseason, so he won't be featuring much. So yeah, my main concerns lie indeed at the back. They did bring in Maxime De Lange from PSV as a goalkeeper. He's supposed to be a big talent, featured already at professional level. Yes, at young PSV, also in the second tier of the Dutch league. So he's considered a big talent. He has a bit of professional experience. All their goalkeepers are young. Teunkens was the experienced one, which is 24 years of age. Yeah, and also he didn't feature that much in the senior squad yet. And yes, like Ben mentioned, again, the only 2 central defenders. I'm sure they will need some more, or I don't know what system they're planning to play. But I also agree with the general feeling of both of you. A mid-table finish, potentially playoff 1, potentially just in playoff 2. I think that is the most likely prediction at the moment. They have some strikers there, Rocha and Nasus, if they perform at their level, they should be okay for this league. I think they should have a calm season indeed, though.
I don't know if there's any such thing as a calm season in this league. There's always just some sort of chaos going on, isn't there? Let's
Fair enough.
go to but I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. Like mid-table, but it won't be calm. But it'll be like as calm as it can get. Let's go to probably the side we know the least about between us, which is Denza, who got promoted from the third tier of Belgian football via the promotion playoff. I think, if I'm right in thinking, they finished fourth in the regular season, got into the playoffs, and then won the playoffs, basically pipping RC Liège to the kind of promotion spot. They then went and raided RC Liège, picking up Michael Lallemans, 29-year-old striker, Eupen-born striker, former Belgian under-19, played a lot in Belgium for different sides, plays for Eupen, Kortrijk, Antwerp, Denza, Liège. 32 goals in the second tier in his career so far, 22 in the third tier. So he's kind of the main man for them, been given the number 9 shirt, and they're going to be very much reliant on him to be the one scoring the goals for them to keep them in this league. Obviously, that job's made a little bit easier by the youth teams being introduced as well. Yours, I guess I want to come to you first on this one because you're probably going to have a little bit of a better idea about kind of the difference between the third and second tier than kind of me and Scott. But how much of a jump do you think it will be for a side like Denza to go into the Challenger League? Like, is there such a big gap between the two leagues, or is it actually not as big a gap as maybe it used to be, which we've seen in kind of some of the other European leagues around the world? Or is it they're expected to struggle, but because of these kind of youth teams, they may actually have a little bit of a better season than they would have had if it had been no youth teams and just a straight up kind of teams without that?
Really difficult to predict. Also, with not much of to go on from the last few years because there's always been other reasons why teams got promoted. You didn't need to be the first in the third tier, but you just needed to apply for a license to play in the. If I'm not mistaken, Lierse was actually the season before they promoted. Were only 13th or so in the third tier. Judged on that, yes, they needed some time to adapt, but they did manage to be relatively competitive at the lower end of the table, but still competitive. I really don't know that many players of them. Lalman, like you said, but basically he had one. I wanted to say he's a proven goal scorer on this level, and I think he has the ability to do that. He's still only 29 as well. But yeah, most of his goals actually, when I looked it up now, came from one season at Eupen. So where he scored 18 times. Nicolas Rijssel, he actually was not so bad, but he also suffered some injuries. I do not know how his level at the moment is. He featured at Oostende and at Roeselare as well. I think for this level he should be a good signing, but again, a bit out of sight, out of mind. I can't really say if he actually has any level still. Wesley Van Bella, I see that's a name that rings a bell, but he's also 36 years old, so they're experienced heads, definitely. That was also long ago, and it was also more in this tier that he featured also at Mechelen, actually, at the start of his career, but not that much on a higher level. But yes, he's an experienced head at this level with almost 250 appearances. But can he still bring a 36? Another question that's really difficult to answer. They didn't have that much of activity. That's maybe a thing to highlight. 5 additions to the squad, so that's at least in addition. It's not so bad, but very difficult to predict. And maybe I should also say, together with Virton, this is a team that's mainly based on not knowing much of the squad. That could end up. I expect them more in the relegation playoff here. Whether that really is in danger or on top of that playoff, that's difficult to predict, but even more difficult to predict, I guess.
Well, I think the first thing to say about Denza for me is welcome to the new boys. Obviously, it's going to be really exciting to see a new side at this level and how they perform at this level. Joris mentioned the 5 incomings. Interestingly, they're all free transfers. So they haven't really spent any money, which is probably just as well because they don't have very much. So they're being financially kind of quite prudent, which they're going to have to do. Something worth highlighting in relation to Denza, I think, is they have a very, very experienced T1 in Reggie Van Acker. Reggie's 67 now, but when you look at his kind of career as a coach, it's extremely experienced, and I think there's a hope that that will count for a lot for them this season. I mean, amongst just some of the clubs he's spent time at as T1 in the past, Denza, Racing Mechelen, Antwerp, Liège, Kortrijk, St. Nicholas, Eindhoven Aalst, and a host of other clubs at lower levels as well. So he knows this level, he knows the lower levels, and I think that's going to be an important choice for them. I think, considering they don't have a lot of finances to be too creative about. So that experience and the motivation that comes with that experience at this level is a big plus for them. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they do. Like Joris, I at the moment would expect a playoff 2 spot, but like we were saying earlier, there is a potential surprise package here.
Yeah, I think playoff 2 is definitely kind of realistic expectations for them. And like you're saying, like kind of looking through the squad, there's not many recognisable names outside the ones that Joris picked up on. And some of those may be into the kind of very late twilight of their careers at this point. Let's move on to the youth teams then. And this is kind of a little bit more difficult in the sense that obviously Scott's already kind of laid out the guidelines for how these teams can operate in the division. Also, we know they can't get promoted. Just quickly go through. So we've got Club Next are back. So Club Bruges' youth team, Anderlecht Futures, obviously Standard Liège 16 FC, and then Young Genk. Obviously, we're going to know a lot more about Young Genk than the other three just because we've got Joris on the podcast. He knows obviously a lot more about Genk than any of that. So we'll start there, and then maybe we can just kind of talk about what we expect these teams to use, like what we expect the kind of parent clubs of these youth teams to use them for in this league. But Joris, just quickly on Young Genk, are there any players that you think if people are going to watch kind of one of these games that they're involved in that they should be looking out for?
There definitely are a few, but I will also propose to go for more of a overview of all 4 of the teams and the different strategies they're taking, because I think that's actually maybe the most interesting part of it all. To quickly go for Young Genk, Mika Goss, 17-year-old, he's a really big talent. He was probably supposed to be playing as a substitute more, but now with Abid's injury, which I already talked about, I think in the other preview as well, he will probably feature a lot more. Left winger, this team also is also together for a long time, so actually in a sense of experience and in being together, they might even be ahead of some other teams that have a lot of movements in their squad. They might have that ahead in a weird way. Maybe they're a bit thin at the center back at the moment, but Daan Dirks is supposed to be coming back still and be signing one of the upcoming days. I think that should not take that long, and we'll have to see how it all pans out. El Canus was their main attraction, one of their main attractions last season, but he's most likely already not going to feature there anymore. If he's almost at the limit, I think if he features a few times more in the senior squad. And there's a few more players that are in the senior squad that are not listed on Transfermarkt now, but probably will feature at least sometimes, maybe most of the times in this team. Also players that are used to play with a lot of these people. So yeah, that's also a bit why the Young Genks team is the youngest theoretically on Transfermarkt, but I'm not sure if that actually will be the case with these senior squad players that are listed at the senior squad there as well. So the mean average age of Young Genk is a bit higher than it's going to be here seen here. Okay, one frustration of mine as well. Why the hell don't you agree on a similar format? And that's like now it doesn't make sense. Club Next, RSA Futures, Standard says FC, Young Genk. Well, what's up with that? Just to make it a standardized version. But okay. That's
everyone loves a rebrand, don't they, guys?
that's just ridiculous in my opinion. But okay, that's a small frustration I had to put out here. About the other teams, I will already taken together. I guess Club Next is actually the team that has spent most of all teams. So they have brought in. Club Brugge actually has. That's one of the strategy things I wanted to talk about as well. Club Brugge brought in a few outlandish talents as well. So a few Danes, I believe, and they already had Nusa. I think he might not be listed here as well. He might be in the senior squad. They definitely stuffed their squad not only with Belgian talent but also with foreign talent. The Japanese Shion Homa as well. They brought in some more talent there. And Young Henk and RSA Future didn't bring in the experienced player, the dispensation player that they are allowed to bring in. I know from Young Genk that it's also the aim to keep it that way, that they don't want that. Club Brugge did, and they brought in Lennart Mertens, an experienced striker from Denza. That's a weird transfer in the sense that it's actually weakening a competitor and strengthening a competitor in the same league, which is a weird thing to do in this context, I think. But that's that's not. It might prove an important addition to them because he's definitely a proven goal scorer at this level. So that might give them some edge over the other youth teams. Standard brought in Duplus, I think, experienced old head. For them, Standard, it would also be interesting to see how it goes even more so than with the other teams, because I do feel like all the big talents that they have will probably feature rather in the senior squad as well and not play here, so that could mean that they will have an even younger squad and suffer a bit more, or most of all youth teams. But it's really difficult to compare. Obviously, Anderlecht also they just have so many players that are in young age in the senior squads. Theoretically, a lot of them could play a few more things. It's also interesting to see how it will go during the World Cup actually, because then in Challenger Pro League there will be 4, I believe, match days. So theoretically, all these young squads could really look completely different for game days, which is a bit very twisted in the system. But at least in theory, that's what they could do. I don't think they will too much, but yeah, with a lot of young players being in the senior squad and the rules what they are, there could be quite some shifts, even more so than in other times of the season, which also could happen. My final general remark is these young teams will be way more prepared than Club Next, because you can't really compare 2 seasons ago. You can't really compare it because they did only know 3 weeks in advance that they would be playing. They didn't have any preparation whatsoever. So I think they will all be way more competitive than Club Next, and because they have prepared for this for, well, at least a full season already last season. Of course, not playing against senior squads yet, but yeah, compiling the squads, they definitely are more ready than Club Next was. Also, the rules are in theory, they're definitely, that opens more options for these senior squad members to get some game time in there, although there are of course limits. Luckily there are. It will be interesting to see how it all pans out. We'll have to see. It's really difficult to predict how they actually will be able to compete at this level. And for me, interesting. I know, especially Ben and some others are not so much fond of it, but despite that, we'll like to see how this all pans out.
Yeah, as Joris was saying, it's a big wild card. This uncharted territory for all of us in Belgium. This couple of things worth mentioning in relation to kind of the under-23 teams, actually, because they can't be promoted effectively to the Pro League. Should one of the under-23 sides finish in a playoff 1 spot after 22 weeks, they will be replaced in playoff 1 by the best performing classic side, if I can describe them like that, non-academy team, next performing one in that playoff 1 spot as well. So, yeah, as Joris was saying, it's a slightly strange setup that we're all going to have to get used to. We just need to see how it goes. One thing worth mentioning is a big shout out to a certain Nicky Aon, who Beveren fans will remember as being the T1 who was coach when Vaasland were relegated to 1B. Nicky went off after a time out of the game, spent a bit of time in Welsh football, but has since, over the summer, come back to be the new T1 at Club Next, which was a very interesting appointment. So there's a spicy, perhaps with a small S, matchup coming up this season between Club Next and Beveren when he goes up against his old side. I'm sure Nicky has a has a point or two to prove about his credentials. So that's going to be interesting to see how that goes. Also, some interesting coaches as well, actually, at the under-23 sides. I mean, the Anderlecht Futures have Robin Veldman there. Robin's actually a former Ajax youth manager as well, so a really good pedigree, a really good school of coaching there. Unsurprisingly, those two things coming together at Anderlecht, as we know, who still have probably one of the finest academies across Europe. It still produces very fine young players. Young Genk, obviously, Hans Sommers is their T1, and he's been there already for I think a little under 3 years. Manager of the under 18s as well. And Standard Liège 16, SL16 are being led by Josef Laumann, former Barnsley manager and a former T2 at Bochum in the Bundesliga as well. So Ben might have seen him kicking about on his Bundesliga travels. So it's going to be interesting to see how the under-23 sides integrate to the bigger picture, because there has on the whole been a bit of discontent around it. It's not something that's gone down terribly well. I want to keep an open mind about it, because I think there are some positives here around player development, and that's the bit I want to focus on, looking at some young talent in these sides, and hopefully getting a closer look at them some weeks and seeing their careers develop firsthand.
One last thing I want to say as well to the general concept of 1B and with the youth teams, to cover all the bases. It's not very likely, but if a senior side of one of these youth sides relegates, then automatically the relegation in the Challenger Pro League is for the youth team of that one, and even if that would not be in the relegation spot or in the last at the end of the season, so it's very unlikely. But if such a big team would fall down, then that also has consequences, of course, for the youth side, that development side that cannot appear in the same division.
Hopefully, we've not confused you more than you already were, everybody. We're trying to clear it up.
Yeah, right. The more you go into it, the more confusing it gets. But no, that final bit from yours does definitely make sense, and I don't think it's going to happen. If I'm honest, I think all four of those first teams, should stay in the Pro League. But you never know. This is Belgian football, and crazy things do happen. I've got nothing more to add. You guys completely summed up perfectly the youth team, so I think we'll leave that one there. And that probably wraps up this preview for 1B, or the Challenger Pro League, as I need to start calling it. I'm just still so stuck in the ways of calling it 1B, and hopefully at some point I'll get over that. Let's quickly look ahead.
Penny jar.
Yeah, there we go. I don't know. The cost of living crisis at the moment. That'd be, yeah. I don't know how to explain that to the energy companies. I say, so I can't afford my bills because I keep saying 1B instead of Challenger Pro League. Anyway, let's look ahead to the opening round of fixtures. Kicks off on Friday night with Denza against Lommel, while also Virton against Molenbeek is at the same time. So nice little double header. Kind of spread yourself across that and well of the 1A. I don't know how you're going to fit it all in, but someone will. Beerschot against SK Beveren on Saturday. That's quite a big one already. Club next against Standard Liège 16. Young Genk open their campaign against Liège, and then Anderlecht's second team, the Futures, host Denza. Guys, been a pleasure. We've wrapped up another preview, this time for the second tier of Belgian football. Anything else you want to add before we wrap this one up?
It's been an absolute delight. Hasn't it, Joris?
Yes, it has. But also, of course, if we made a mistake somewhere in some namings or anything, or apologies for that can happen.
I mean, it'd be a shock if it was. It'd be a shock if it was yours, because usually it's me or Scott making these terrible name pronunciations. So, I mean, if yours gets it wrong, we've got no hope.
Yeah, there's always the penny jar for Joris as well. It applies to all of us. Enjoy your football, everybody, this weekend, whatever you're watching.
Absolutely. As always, thanks for listening to the Belgian Football Podcast. I'll save the usuals, because you probably, if you're listening to this, you listen to us most of the time. So yeah, leave us a review, find us on Twitter and kind of all the socials if you want to get in touch. But once again, thank you for listening, and we'll speak to you very soon on another episode of the Belgian Football Podcast.